In the United States, an average of 3 people die every hour from gun-related injuries, including homicides, suicides, and accidental shootings. And it's the last category, accidental shootings, that hasn't gotten as much attention as the other categories. According to the Centers for Disease Control, between 2005 and 2015, more than 6,500 people in the U.S. died from unintentional shootings. Most of these victims were under the age of 25, but some of them were as young as 1 year old. The majority of these deaths were children in elementary and junior high schools. While most of those accidental shooting deaths were due to negligence on the part of the gun owner, there were some that could have only been prevented by the manufacturers of those firearms. And that's the story of Remington, one of the largest rifle manufacturers in the U.S. The Remington Model 700 is the most popular bolt-action rifle in the U.S., and it was designed with a very serious flaw that the company's known about for almost 70 years. This flaw, according to the company's own documents, is that the gun can occasionally go off without anyone ever having to pull the trigger. This happens because of a faulty trigger design the company came up with in the 1940s. The company wanted to design a system where the trigger could be pulled with as little pressure as possible to make the gun fire. There are 2 pieces involved in this mechanism, and a connector between the trigger and the connector doesn't always reconnect properly, that allows these pieces to fall in between the 2, causing the trigger to become unstable. This mechanism is a disaster. But again, Remington's own documents show that as early as 1943, company executives understood that their design couldn't work because the pieces inside of the trigger could disconnect from one another, which would then lead to the rifle firing by itself. Remington received numerous field complaints during its initial testing of this new trigger mechanism, and the engineers at the company recommended that the company go with a different trigger design. But in 1948, the company said that they made the decision to stick with their original design in spite of the deadly flaws that they were well aware of. So let's fast track forward 70 years to today. These documents showing the company's knowledge of their defects and decision to ignore them were only made public after the tremendous effort of the legal advocacy group, the Public Justice. Public Justice obtained these documents, made them public, and helped to expose a 70-year cover-up by Remington. Today, there are about 7.5 million Remington rifles with this defective trigger design in the hands of American citizens. These rifles are they're time bombs. They're waiting to discharge their payload without any warning. Joining me now to talk about these Remington rifles and the destruction they've caused is Arthur Bryant, Chairman of Public Justice. Arthur, tell us exactly what this defect is in these Remington rifles. What's going on there?
Well, the basic defect, Mike, is that the gun will fire without anybody pulling the trigger. It is a danger to every gun owner who has it, to their loved ones, to innocent third parties. That's the basic defect. It actually stems from a fundamental design defect. This is the only rifle design in the world that has 2 pieces to it. It has both a trigger connector and a trigger body. Now, they did this because they thought that would make the pull easier and make it shoot more with less pull on it, which I guess is true. But the problem is the trigger connector itself doesn't reset like it should always. And because there's 2 pieces, anything that falls between the 2 pieces, like metal scrapings or dirt even, can get in there and leave them unstable. So if anybody bumps the rifle, if you put the safety on the rifle, if you take the safety off on the rifle, and a number of other ways, the gun fires on its own.
Yeah, there's actually lead residue is enough to actually bring this about. And of course, that happens every time you fire a gun. I think the troublesome thing about this is the people listening to this might say, well, gee, this is something the company just learned. How long did the company know about this defect, clear defect, and why didn't executives choose to do something about it to save lives?
Well, to be clear, the company has known about this since the 1940s, within a year of when the design was first developed by a master marksman, Mike Walker. It's called the Walker Fire Control. Their own documents show they ran tests, and Walker himself said, we have a problem here, here's how we fix it. And the company looked at fixing it and decided it was going to cost them too much money. They should leave it there. And the documents we've posted on the web at www.remingtondocuments.com show that they repeatedly considered over the years doing a full recall and retrofit with a safe trigger, which they've now agreed to do. But for decades, they didn't do this because it was going to cost them too much money, even while they knew people were dying, even while people were being maimed. And even now, they still insist there's nothing wrong with this trigger when they know it's actually defective and killing people.
Arthur, your organization, Public Justice, was successful in obtaining these Remington documents after the company had hidden them. I mean, intentionally hidden them from the public
right.
for decades. They knew they were hiding them. They were back in the file cabinets. They wouldn't give them to anybody. But you know what's so interesting about this is most people don't know that the gun industry has an immunity of being sued even for something as outrageous as this. Talk about that a little bit, this crazy immunity that we've given them.
Well, the gun industry does have immunity from all sorts of lawsuits. But thankfully, in this case, one they don't have immunity for is for defectively designing a rifle or a gun, or defectively manufacturing it. So in fact, there were lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit, literally dozens, over 150 lawsuits against Remington from people being shot or killed or maimed by these triggers. The problem is they use secrecy orders, they use sealing orders, they settled these cases but only with the agreement that all the information would be kept secret. So this has gone on for, like you said, close to 70 years, when they knew there is a defect, when people were getting killed, and when there were lawsuits, they just managed to keep it all hidden.
Tell us how you managed to get this information. I think it's extraordinary that you got this information. You know, as you know, I've been doing this 35 years. I know how difficult it is to get to some of this information. How did you come across this?
Well, thank you first for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. I'm thrilled by the work you do, and I'm thrilled that we got these unsealed. Actually, it started with a man named Richard Barber in Montana. He's an NRA member. He's a gun rights advocate. He believes strongly in the Second Amendment. But he and his wife and his 2 kids would go off shooting on weekends. Over the weekend, they would come back home. They'd have a great weekend. And one weekend, they came back, and his wife is emptying their rifles, as Remington 700. To empty the rifle, you have to take off the safety. She takes off the safety. Her finger is nowhere near the trigger. The gun fires on its own, shoots and kills their 9-year-old son, Gus Barber. And they were devastated, as you can imagine.
Is this typical of what you've seen? Is this typical of what you've seen in these cases, Arthur? This is a pretty typical situation?
Yes, horrifically typical. What was atypical here was that Richard Barber was an extraordinary person and was dedicated to making sure this doesn't continue. So he came to us and asked us, after he brought his own lawsuit and it settled quickly, and he got Remington to agree to fix the design, which it has now done. He asked us to unseal court records for him. Public Justice has a special project to unseal court records. What we unsealed, like I said, is up at www.remingtondocuments.com. But what they showed was that this company had known for decades that people were being hurt, people were being killed, that the gun was defective and doing nothing about it. And how we got them ultimately unsealed, we first unsealed one court file by just moving to intervene, but that was one court file. And then a proposed class action settlement was reached with Remington, and Public Justice is not involved in it, where Remington has agreed to give a free trigger retrofit with a now safe trigger, a new safe trigger, to anyone who has one of these guns who makes a claim. And everyone who has one of these
Arthur,
guns
let me ask you something. How many of these
Yeah.
defective rifles are still out there? I mean, isn't that the problem? They
Yes.
know there's thousands of these rifles. How many are still out there that people don't even know about this problem?
There are 7.5 million of these rifles still out there. Every single one of them is a danger. Everyone who has one of these needs to file a claim in this lawsuit called Pollard versus Remington to protect themselves, to protect their family members, to protect their loved one. The fact that you've had it for 20 years and it hasn't fired without a trigger pull doesn't mean it won't happen the next time you pick up the gun. You need to get this fixed. We ultimately got these documents unsealed by threatening to sue if they didn't unseal them. And since Remington had agreed in this proposed settlement that it would give a free trigger retrofit to anybody who made a claim, it knew if we came in and said, how are people supposed to decide if it made a claim, whether to make a claim, if it can't see the truth, it knew that if we got into court, we would win. And so it agreed to give us all the documents. It didn't put them on the web, so we had to put them on the web. But anybody who wants to know the truth, know how to make a claim, know how to protect themselves, needs to go to www.remingtondocuments.com or to go to Public Justice, www.publicjustice.net to get more information and make the claim.
All right. Arthur, what's so important about this? This can happen so easily. This can simply be a buildup of lead residue in that trigger mechanism. If you know somebody with this rifle, get in touch with Public Justice. They can at least work your way through this and keep your family safe.